Welcome to those who have tuned in tonight. It's great to see you here. We thank you for joining us. Now, for those who are watching, actually there might be some who will tune in later on and rewatch this video and may not know me. So I am Helen Houghton, the co-leader of New Conservative Party. We have Debbie, who is a Kiwi mum, who will be joining me shortly. She's just in the waiting room. I'll bring her into the studio soon. But just as a little background on this, we're going to be speaking around how Debbie has had to navigate through our New Zealand school system and how they infringed on her parental rights. Before I bring her into the studio, though, I'm just going to share why New Conservative, why did I become involved with New Conservative Party? So New Conservative Party have always recognise that there are two biological genders and that gender dysphoria and disorders of sex development are challenging issues that require support and understanding. So New Conservative have said that they will implement a complete ban on harmful, unscientific gender theory in all schools. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that towards the end to tell you what I have done and what you can do to jump on board there. So gender theory in schools is why I became actively involved in politics. When schools are being politicised by some minority groups that negatively impact our most vulnerable, you cannot avoid becoming political. So just, I'm going to, before I continue with this, I'm going to bring in Debbie. Now, Debbie is using a different name and she's also not going to have her video on. As you can well imagine, we need to make sure that Debbie is protecting the privacy of her family. So welcome, Debbie. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, good evening, Helen. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story and have a voice tonight. I know that many parents have a fear of and are being misled around this issue. The transgender movement is tearing families apart, but it isn't because parents don't love their children. It's because adults who ask questions are getting slandered. So hopefully tonight I can bring something of value to your listeners and I'll just do my best to make a noise and make it clear, as someone famous once said. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing with New Conservative, just to bring light to this important issue here in New Zealand. Our children really deserve nothing less from us.
Thank you, Debbie. Now, just for some contextual background for anyone who haven't been following the indoctrination of gender ideology in our schools, and also for those who are fortunate that their school hasn't adopted this insidious political agenda, the Ministry of Education released a document in 2020 called Relationships and Sexuality Education for their teachers and school leaders. Now, this was so that they would be more inclusive and to help children recognise the importance of diversity. Now, anyone would think that for decades teachers haven't already been inclusive, but anyway, there's also the issue here, we're talking about children recognising diversity in relationships, children. So this is around sexuality education. Now, however, it was 2 years before this that I stumbled across inclusive education, would you believe, on a Facebook post. So I highlight this because for those who are in the school system, you know that every time your school is going to teach sexuality, they are required by law to inform their communities. And so if you think back to what I just said about a post on social media from the Ministry of Education talking about this inclusive ideology in schools, it's purely so that in years to come, or hopefully not that far away, when parents come back to complain and say, why did you not tell me that this was happening in our schools, they can actually say, well, yes, we ticked that box, we put it through social media, which is pretty appalling. So I looked into that, and alarm bells rang straight away, with not just the content, but some of the lessons that I have seen and have been taught in our schools. So Debbie, this is not a matter of being inclusive, as you know, the umbrella term used to push the gender ideology that's embedded now across many curriculum areas in our school. Can you tell us, first off, how you found how you found the school when there were concerns for your daughter, and maybe some background to your family situation, Debbie? Thanks.
Well, my story is not really in any way anecdotal. I've since spoken to many other parents that are here in New Zealand as well as overseas, and it's as if our kids are following a script from a coach. And I certainly found this to be my own experience as well. It's not to say that our kids are not experiencing suffering in their own ways. I'm absolutely sure that they are, but there are multiple and complex reasons why we all make the decisions that we make. However, given the very clear patterns that we all observe, I think we can safely conclude that there's very little organic about any of this. For my own story, a little bit of background. Unfortunately for my own daughter, I chose to marry a man who didn't invest time in our family. He had desperately wanted a boy, and when my daughter was about 5 years old, he told her so. So, of course, that's what she wanted to be for his attention and time, naturally. Suddenly, there weren't any more tea parties, no more dolls, no more dresses, no more pink. She decided that she liked to play with trucks and cars, but funnily enough, they just sat in a cupboard and didn't get played with. She was far more interested in soft, fluffy animal toys, which she quite liked to play pet shop with, things like that. But what she really wanted was her daddy's love, obviously, his time and attention, which only came in sort of small quantities every now and then when he felt like it, but it was withdrawn when he felt like it as well. And then eventually he was gone for good. So during this time, I noticed that my daughter began to regress developmentally. So she was having more childlike behaviour. Her grades were dropping. She was wetting the bed, not wanting to sleep without me, wanting to sleep with the lights on, just really obviously in signs of trauma that I can see now. But obviously being in trauma myself at the time, I was so isolated and I didn't know what to do. And of course, every time I tried to talk to her about it, she was in pretend, I'm a puppy, I'm a kitty. I think in hindsight, her being in denial like that is a coping mechanism, and that did help her, but it's not helpful that she's carrying it through now as well, in pretending like this avatar as well. So when she was about 10, we moved to Hamilton in the North Island, and I was able to be a stay-at-home mum for her again, and she attended a small country school where she was nurtured and loved and showed that she could succeed, and she really started to blossom, and I began to see the little girl I bonded with again, and it was just wonderful. It was just a golden time for our family, but she still didn't want to talk about her dad. She had some anger around his behaviours towards me. That was probably the most she would open up to me about it. And she thought that I never should have married him in the first place. And she was probably right. So high school continued to come, and she continued to make some good grades and had some lovely friends. And I always told her that if there was anything that she didn't feel like she could talk to me about, that there was a nice school counsellor who I thought was trustworthy at her all-girls high school, and she would occasionally go and talk to her. But as you know, in the last years of her time there, she was visiting the counsellor less and less, and she really did seem happy. When her older sister decided to move to Christchurch to do a degree at Canterbury Uni, we decided that it might be a good idea for us to move down and be with her as well, to keep the family together. But in hindsight, I think that was probably a bad idea, because that's when all of the trouble started. We moved initially to Rolleston, a town outside of Christchurch, and so the school that she was zoned for there, she started there, and there was I remember she said that she didn't like the long skirt of the school uniform, but that was probably the only thing that was seemed obviously to bother her when she very first started. And I visited the school dean when she started and made sure that she was settling in nicely with some good friends and was attentive in her classes, and I was just assured that everything was fine. And then about 6 weeks later, I got a very unexpected call from the school's guidance counsellor. She said to me on the phone, I'll never forget it, she stressed to me, your daughter has begged me not to call you. She doesn't want me to tell you about this, but I have to. You know, she just loves you so much. She doesn't want to hurt you. And that got my alarm bells ringing right away, of course. But she proceeded to tell me that my daughter was in fact suicidal, and I needed to get her to a doctor straight away. And it just seemed like totally blindsided. I thought, no way, that's not my daughter. No. You know, we just spent a whole road trip, not even like what would that have been 6 weeks ago. You know, we were singing ABBA karaoke all the way down from the South Island in the car. We were having a great fun together. I just could not imagine that, because you know, suicide is such a varied, complex emotion. It's never just one thing that makes you believe that you need to commit suicide. So I really had my doubts, but you know, I'm a conscientious parent, and I made the appointment anyway. And I just wondered what on earth was going on. And so the GP obviously didn't know us from a bar of soap, because we were new in the area. And when she got there, I was surprised that I wasn't allowed into the room with her to understand what was happening. And she came out, and I stuck my head in the door, and I said, is she suicidal? And is it true? And, you know, and the doctor, she almost laughed at me and just said, no, she's totally fine. She's not in any danger of any self-harm. And I knew that. I knew it, but I was so perplexed as to what on earth was happening. And I asked her, I said, what's happening? What's going on? And she said, oh, it's all right, Mum. It's just silly. Don't worry about anything. It's fine. And I couldn't get anything out of her. So my usually my relationship with all my kids is I'm open and honest with them, and I give them the benefit of the doubt, and I tell them the dangers if I think that I can see around corner, and I can see that there's a potential danger there, and or even it's a risk to their health, and I tell them. But you know, all of these little things that were happening, she was basically telling me it was not a big deal, that it was just a trend thing, that there was nothing really to worry about. So then some odd things started happening. She asked me if she could spend her 17th birthday with her friends at Armageddon and dress up in cosplay. And she knew that I had a background in theatre. And so I agreed straight away. I thought it was fun. We went to Spotlight. We bought supplies to make a costume. And part of her costume was a binder. Well, the binder came, and the supplies for her costume stayed in the cupboard. And the birthday came, and no friends or cosplay happened at Armageddon. It was just a family day out, and yet the binder was worn constantly. And I was thinking, what's happening here? And I tried to talk to her about how she needed to take it off, because compression to the chest, with things like corsets, that we all know that that's not good for women to wear. We've known that for a long time. Then I noticed that her new friends were calling her a male name, and I asked her what that was about, and she said, "Oh, it's just a nickname, Mum. No big deal." And then I noticed things like she phoned me from school one day, and they were having a shave for a cure day, and she asked me if she could shave her head. And I've never been one to sort of worry about hair because it grows back, and I'm not, I know that kids do these things, and I said, sure, honey. But looking back, I can see there was more things going on.
So this was all happening while she was attending school every day, and the school knew this was happening, but you weren't aware of it.
Yeah. So she'd been going to the school counsellor again, and I'd asked if there was a possibility that I could join her in one of her sessions to help understand what might be like going on in her head, and possibly offer the counsellor some of my own perspective. And she agreed. I was surprised that she agreed. But the counsellor was a public service at our GP's office. So the day came, and I waited in the waiting room for a good 45 minutes of the 1 hour session. And when I was finally invited in, the first thing I noticed was my daughter was shaking and white, and she would not look me in the face at all. So I sat down, and the therapist did most of the talking. She was telling me that my daughter was a man, and that I would have to call her he, him pronouns and his new name of choice. And that's just the way it had to be, or else he would commit suicide. Now,
was that your first time in that with that particular doctor or guidance or
the therapist? Yes.
The first time, and she was telling you all this.
Yes. So I've since found out that those studies that they threaten parents with, that if you don't affirm, they will commit suicide, or better to have a live son than a dead daughter arguments, those emotional manipulations, those studies that apparently were the proof of that have all since been quietly retracted because they were very weak studies and totally unscientific. So I just want parents to understand that if that is the gun at your head, so to speak, it's not loaded. Just don't buy in. So I gently started telling my daughter at the time, look, honey, I don't care how you dress. I don't care what you look like. I love you just the way you are. You don't have to change anything. And as I was using my daughter's names and pronouns, the therapist was talking over the top of me, correcting my, policing my language, which just made me incredibly angry. And I was starting to try to tell the therapist about some of this background that I've just been talking to you about, and how there might be other reasons why she feels the way she does, and wouldn't it be better to explore those reasons? And I just got shut down completely. I was so angry. And when you get angry, you can't think straight and you say things that you're going to regret. So I just shut up and I hightailed it out of there. And she started to talk about how the therapist started to talk about how the next steps for my daughter was going to be testosterone and surgeries. And I was so upset that I was just shut down completely. So on the ride back, I was taking my daughter back to school, and I was just feeling like an emotional wreck. I was shaking. I just couldn't think straight, and all I could feel was like this whole process. I couldn't. There was nothing I could do about it, and it seemed like my own daughter was trying to slowly kill off my little girl, and it just was breaking my heart. And I can't explain to anyone who hasn't gone through it that kind of excruciating anguish of not being able to speak reason with somebody who you've been so closely bonded with, believe you've been so closely bonded with your whole life. It's a huge betrayal of trust. And looking back on it now, I can see that it's actually not been her fault. She's been doing what teenagers do, and this happened so fast. I understand that she was just trying to fit in with a group of kids that she met who were also identifying this way. So I don't hold any animosity at all towards her or her friends. It's the adults who are responsible.
100%. We're the ones who are supposed to be protecting children, protecting their vulnerabilities, especially those who are in a position of authority, like the teachers, the educators, the school leaders, the doctors and therapists. This is appalling. Yeah, absolutely appalling. And I just, you're so brave coming on here tonight. Just a couple of things with what you've just said, Debbie, if I can unpack that a little bit. You mentioned affirming that therapist was talking about, that you needed to affirm. Now, the horrific thing is that this is happening in our schools. So the curriculum document around the sexuality stuff, it all starts with, every statement starts with affirm, affirm, affirm. There is nothing there about being critical. So, I just want to say that instead of affirming children that they could be born in the wrong body, we need to actually be affirming that their changes in puberty are normal, that their discomfort navigating puberty is normal. For many teens, puberty is strange and uncomfortable, and that is a normal process. That is what we need to affirm, not affirming something that is untrue like this. So, if there's any teachers out here watching right now, we've still got plenty to say, but I think you really need to be going to speak to your school boards and questioning the Ministry of Education, but not finished. So Debbie, can you just tell me as well, that counsellor or that therapist you went to see, I'm just horrified. Can you tell me how many times your daughter had been to see this therapist before she was telling you that your daughter now needs to go onto hormone therapy and then it will lead to surgery? Did she see this person
She had seen it before. I can't remember the exact amount of times. I think it might have been about 6.
6 times. A 17-year-old, and she's, hasn't spoken to you before at all about the childhood issues that had gone on, and this therapist is just putting her down the path of hormones and surgery. I mean, that is criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And this is happening in New Zealand. Like you said, you're in Christchurch. So this is, 3 years ago when I brought this out in a petition, different teachers as well as parents were saying, no, this is not happening here. It's not happening in our schools. Well, it is. It's been happening for a number of years now, and it's just, being pushed even more. So what have you learned then about, just before I ask you that, so did that guidance counsellor at school or the counsellor, or did I ask you this? No, that you went to with your daughter, ever offer you support or lead you to anyone who you could talk to about any of this?
No, nobody did. In fact, to be honest, I was so angry and so mistrusting that even if they had, I would have been very questioning of who they thought might be good for me. I think a lot of some of the reasoning they have is to get the parents into pro-trans counselling to, re-educate them, for want of a better term, or help them to accept what they can't change. But I did actually go to some counsellor, a counsellor that I found, and I think the only really good thing that was helpful from that perspective is it validated my own role as a parent, and not just to know that there was nothing that I could have done differently, and I haven't done anything wrong. I didn't go horribly wrong in my parenting, and this is the result. It's just a result of living in a world that is fallen, I suppose.
There's quite a few questions up here which we'll address a little bit later. So for those people who are online now, thank you for being here, and you've got really good questions there. So just be patient, please, and we will address some of those. I'd just like Debbie to be able to tell her story and us to discuss what is happening in the schools, and then we'll come back to those questions. So obviously, I don't think I had a chance to say this, but 3 years ago, or a little over 3 years ago, when I told you that I saw what was happening, I petitioned the government around this. Some of you might have seen that. There were many teachers and parents who were concerned who signed that petition. There was over 40,000 concerned people signed that. Now, I went to Parliament, spoke to a submission, and quite frankly, not long after that, they actually pushed even more around this gender stuff. So there's a number of resources that we can lead you to towards the end of this interview. Look, as far as I'm concerned, and I know many parents will feel the same, the schools, Ministry of Education, the government have no business or authority pushing this onto our children. So we will stand up to this, and we do intend to get this gender theory removed from schools before it continues to damage children. Now, this has been going on worldwide, and there are some other organisations who have been shut down overseas and realising the consequences of this, as well as many children who got caught up in it and have they transitioned to the opposite sex and now have detransitioned. And there are many of these stories talking about, we can briefly discuss that. What have you learned? So obviously for the last couple of years, that's all I researched all around these areas and found alarming things. But I'm sure, Debbie, that you as well have learned quite a lot around transgenderism. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I have learned an awful lot. When I found out that this was what I was dealing with my daughter, I went at it like a crazy woman for about 18 months. It was all I could ever think of. I couldn't eat or sleep. I was going through a lot of grief. And the more that I learned, the worse it got, because transgenderism is it began really in the 1960s by three men. Their names are Alfred Kinsey, Harry Benjamin, and New Zealand's own John Money. And they were pedophiles. They called themselves sex experts, but they were pedophiles. And I'm sad to say that WPATH today, nothing much has changed. The ideology itself is rooted in Cartesian dualism philosophy, which is the idea that the body is nothing and separate from the mind and the feelings, and the mind and the feelings are everything. So whatever the mind and the feelings say is what the body should or ought to be, according to this theory. So really, there is no. I think this Cartesian dualism has been debunked so many times in history. We are biologically wired to be male or female. There's huge variations in our femaleness and our maleness. That kind of goes without saying. We've known that forever. But with the medicalisation, there are just huge complications, and we're told that it's all reversible and it's all safe. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's just not reversible. You can't grow boobs back for your baby to feed off. You can't even do like if you have like a what are they called, vaginoplasties? That's fraught with incontinence and loss of sexual function, and these things are destroying the lives of our kids, and they don't realise it. There is a huge $1.3 million US potentially to be made from every kid that believes that they need trans medical care. So it's easy to see who benefits from this. Things like puberty blockers that are supposed to pause the puberty and give them time to think. Well, they don't because the kids, their internal organs, they don't grow anymore. Nothing develops along its natural course anymore. So you get these 19-year-olds with the internal organs of 12-year-olds. How is that any good for their sports days and the health? It's not. And the leader of WPATH, incidentally, has reported that puberty blockers have been found most recently to cause complete loss of sexual function for these kids as they grow up. So they know that this is damaging. What else? The cross-sex hormones in female bodies, the huge doses of testosterone and the huge doses of estrogen in the male bodies, they cause major endocrine disorders. And for women with the testosterone, they're going to get pain, vaginal atrophy, painful intercourse. The atrophy is real, and it's going to lead to the doctor saying, "Oh, you need a hysterectomy now." Well, how is that loving? How is that kind? How is that inspirational for her to be looking at a lifetime with no family when all of the family that she's grown up with has passed away, and she's sitting there alone with no children of her own? How is that heroic? I'd love to know. Our hormones are made of cholesterol. So to flood the body with huge amounts of cholesterol is obviously going to lead to atherosclerosis and heart disease, which is, surprise, surprise, the number one killer of Western peoples. And the first symptom of heart disease is sudden death. You don't know if you've got heart disease. So that's a concern as well as early osteoporosis, which is another big risk factor, making them old before their time. They've got weight gain distribution around their body, leading to complications like obesity and diabetes. There's even talk of possible liver damage and cancers. So where is all the love in this? Please tell me. I'd love to know. So I'm sorry, Helen. It makes me really angry, especially when we know that it's true from studies out of Europe that the people who do transition only realise after 7 to 10 years after transition, when nobody's following them anymore, that transitioning didn't solve anything. And they're left with constant dependence on pharmaceutical medicines for physical and emotional pain, and much needed corrective surgeries that they can't get insurance to pay for. This is when the suicide skyrockets, but nobody wants to talk about it. And it's just so criminal. And it breaks my heart for these kids because they don't know. That nobody tells them about that. How can they see around the corners to give their consent for things that they just can't even imagine?
Yeah, it's a really tough interview, this one, and a tough topic. But like you said, we have to be talking about this. This is infecting every school, and for those schools out there that haven't actually been teaching it, because I know there are many who won't go near it, but the ministry are still actually are aware of that, and they also will be trying to force it even more so from different things that I've actually heard. But look, you've mentioned a couple of things there. One was around the different variations of female and male, and we all know that some males can be more feminine and some females could be more masculine. Gosh, yes. I remember 20 years ago when I was bodybuilding, I loved the male, the physique of the muscle growing. And, part of me sometimes thinks I've got a bit of male brain myself, but I love being a woman. So
yes, of course.
But what I say there around that is, they've really confused the issue for our children, because yes, we understand that we don't want the stereotypical, the only boys do this and only girls do that, but this has gone way too far. Like I said, some of these boys that have more feminine characteristics and vice versa, there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem now is, as soon as that's identified, they're led down this path of questioning themselves, like, oh, maybe you should have really been born as a girl. It is happening in our school. So I'll just really quickly, because I haven't, you've got so much more to say, but I just want to quickly share something around that. When I was a full-time teacher, and I went down to part-time, and then just went to relief teaching, because I run a charitable trust supporting people in the community. because again, I felt like the government's letting our people down. But besides that, I was teaching in one particular school where I was teaching in 4 different classrooms in the senior school. Now, obviously, I'm not going to name the school or the or anything about that, but this particular these 4 classrooms that I would rotate around, I was in this particular class a day after they had the sexuality lesson, and the very next day I was teaching them, and sent the children to do a task on the digital device as you do, and saw this boy mucking around and wondered what he was doing. So I questioned him. It looked like he was just a bit off task. And on the iPads I've got these lots of apps, and ones where you can take photos of yourself and make yourself look different. Anyway, I questioned him, asked him what he was doing, and he told me that he was trying to work out what he'd look like as a girl. Now, this is, like I said, it was a day straight after they'd had the gender lesson. And look, the alarming thing is about this student, and there's so many different reasons why these children fall into this trap, but this child had 3 older sisters who were high achievers, okay? They had a lot of attention, and, it's sad to say that this boy wasn't in that, wasn't getting attention. There were a few other things around that family situation as well. So I just point that out to say how damaging and how vulnerable our children are. And when they are fed this through their teachers, like it's normal that children are born in the wrong body, like this is a normal thing. I mean, you've got children thinking, oh, maybe believing that they can actually change sex willy-nilly when they want to. Sorry, willy-nilly is probably not the good term to use. But there's a spectrum, right? I mean, and if you look into this whole agenda, which clearly Debbie and I have, you'll find out that these people who are in this group, they are talking about this spectrum from one end to the other. You can move along the spectrum and change, and one day you could be identify as this, and the next day you could identify as something completely different. So they don't even know who they are. And talk about messing with your foundation and your identity. We are really messing up children. So I've had a lot of parents contact me since the petition, worried because their children have come to them and told them some things that were being taught. I've got parents contacting me that their children have anxiety after being in sexuality classrooms. Look, years ago we taught the basics, and even then kids don't like being in the classroom. It's like, it's a really these are private personal details, and yet we've got children now in these big classrooms discussing this, so much more extreme and radicalization of sexuality, like also as if their sexuality depends on everything about their life, and they should be defined by this. We are locking children into an identity where there are children walking around school now identifying as lesbian, gay, whatever. But the transgender area is hugely concerning. All of this should not be in schools. So if people choose to live a certain way as adults, that's absolutely fine. We're not interested in that. What we're interested in here is we're really concerned about this coming into schools. This should not be in our schools. So you don't need to apologize to me, by the way, of what you're sharing, anything that you're talking about. This is an emotional topic. I get emotional about this, which is why I'm, campaigning around it. So do not apologize. Now, we talked about this also being a superficial fix. So one of the detransitioners over in UK, many people might have heard about her, Kira Bell. She's taken, had a lawsuit around this because this happened. She was affirmed in school around this, instead of them actually looking at some of the wider issues that might have caused this identity issue. And she said what they did was they gave her a temporary superficial fix for a complex identity issue. She said that children, sorry, I've got something in my eye and it's not a tear. She said that children have no concept of long-term consequences.
No, they don't.
And that children are very eager to get on the hormones because it's been wrapped up as the best solution for them. And the lawyer in her case said that children are not even able to understand. So do they have sufficient life experiences of the loss of fertility, like you're talking about, the loss of sexual function? And I'll let you continue while I'm trying to get that thing out of my eye.
Yeah, no, of course they don't have any idea. They don't know what sex is. They don't know what sex is.
No, they don't.
It's impossible for them to make that decision. So to put those sort of things on kids is not really about the kids. I think the more that I think about it, it's more about the adults feeling good about themselves, with believing that they are politically correct, I suppose. But yeah, Kira Bell's case was pretty groundbreaking, and of course now with the Tavistock closed, things are starting to happen, and I'm really praying and hoping that the tides will turn.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I had to duck out then. I've got a major issue with my eye right now. So anyway, just before we finish up, because I know that there's some questions, but can I just say, what would you say to the Ministry of Education in regards to gender theory being taught in our schools?
The Ministry of Education needs to look further into WPATH, because WPATH knows exactly what they're doing, and there needs to come a day when our kids are going to realise that WPATH and the government and medical professionals, they all know exactly what they're doing, and it will come back and bite you. It really will come back and bite you. The lawsuits are happening. The lawsuits are already coming. And I just, there's going to be an awful lot of chaos and grief when it does. So I really hope that justice is done. It does get people, it does get families very upset when we think about how predators operate, because we think normal people don't think like that. And I'm convinced that a lot of their teachers, they don't particularly want to share their political and religious and sexual beliefs with the kids that they teach. And I think that, there's a lot of that going on in America, perhaps, maybe in Canada, perhaps, but I really hope that it's not happening so much in New Zealand. But those therapists, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and they're getting a paycheck for it, and it's criminal. They are bordering on eugenics. I hate to say it, but they are bordering on eugenics, and it's just criminal.
So Ray's just said, yes, Debbie, it's about adult philosophy and willingness to reconstruct society. Yeah. So I know that, in this whole gender stuff in schools, they're talking about shifting social norms. Well, whose social norms are we shifting to? And, what was wrong with the social norms? Yeah. So anyway, that's interesting. So we've got here just a couple of questions. I'll just show them up on the screen, actually. Great to see some politicians. Oh, yeah, thank you. There's not many of us, actually. I'm pretty sure New Conservative, we are the only party who are talking about this. There's no one else standing up against it. And we've got Yvette say so much about the education system. Homeschooling is the way to go. Interestingly, Yvette, that about 3 years ago when we first started bringing this out, that the homeschoolers, they grew. That community grew a lot then, and not surprising. So I think we'll just...
Are there any questions? Debbie, where is your daughter now? Okay. My daughter is living in Australia with her friend. She's got a friend in there. She's working for KFC. She's got a job at KFC. She's found it a little bit difficult to hold a job. She's got a lot of anxiety still. She's got a lot of health issues, and I suspect that's probably from the testosterone that she's been taking. I have a hard time talking to her, but not because not because she's trans or trying to be a man, although that part does hurt, but because of there's no grounding in reality in other areas. So there'll be a lot of storytelling, and I can't necessarily always trust that what she's telling me is the truth. There's been a severing in our bond, and it's almost like I'm talking to an avatar and not the girl I knew, and I miss her terribly. So I think a lot of it is just trying to it's sort of their way of trying to be safe. Here he's a false person that you can attack, but it doesn't really hurt me because it's not really me. It's a little bit more of a psychological defense mechanism, I suppose, from trauma. I'll see if I can read some of these questions. The screen is so small. I need some glasses or something.
There's a really good comment there right now from Sophie. They will play it down, I'm sure, and just say it's all about being inclusive, ensuring children that are different feel like they belong, and it's ensuring all the other children are aware and can be accepting. Now that's really key because, like I said, a lot of teaching staff still don't know it's happening or it's not happening at their school, and credit to them that they haven't picked this up. But, inclusivity, since when have schools not been inclusive? So you really
We've always been inclusive. I mean, we grew up in a generation with KISS and Culture Club and, boy bands with big hair and makeup. Well, we didn't care. They were awesome. Billy Idol, and we grew up with all of these people that we looked up to, and they did not dress gender norm. They were fantastic, and they still are, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we love them. But
you're right.
they didn't go butchering themselves. You know,
like you said, we have been inclusive as a society. It's just when they start bringing this into children, into school, into education, this is not acceptable. Now, with the how Sophie mentioned that they will just play it down. I have heard of many schools play it down, but I've also heard of many schools that are fully embracing this, and this is with fully embracing it, and other schools don't know about it. When the petition first went out, I had a principal contact me, and he asked me if we're supposed to be teaching this stuff. Now, I asked him if he'd seen the sexuality guidelines that had been put out a few years ago, and he told me that the ministry had not even sent them to him. So this is why you'll hear some schools and some teachers say that, no, we're not teaching this. We've never seen it, because they haven't actually even been, gone through this sexuality guidelines. So don't be convinced just because a school says, or some teachers might say, no, we're not doing it, or it's not out there. It is out there. Now, Alana has a really good comment. The Ministry of Education have way overstepped here. You need to contact your schools and see if they support it, and pull your children from the health programs if they support it. It's criminal what they're doing. Completely agree with Alana there. Now, some schools are not actually even getting their normal teachers to teach it. They have got other organisations coming in, and they call it facilitators. So you've got the family planning, you have Nest Consulting. There are a number of organisations. So if you hear back from the teachers or the principals to say, it's okay, we've got this really good organisation who are teaching it, I would be very cautious of that and asking to see the content, the lessons. Now, tonight we don't have a chance to go through all the lessons. That will be for another live, because I can assure you I have evidence of different lessons that you would be horrified of, not just with the gender stuff, but with sexual overexposure to sexual explicit lessons. So now Shelley's asked if I confront my son's school, the Board of Trustees and principals and teachers, what are they going to say? Well, I think we just probably touched on that, Shelley. You might get a little bit of a run round, or a, kind of them say that it's okay, we're not doing that. I know that many people have come back to me and said, well, they're only teaching the basics, or as little as they can. But I think what we need to be worried about is more the Ministry of Education. So the ministry are the ones pushing this. It's not like your school is, the bad guy, and most teachers want to do right by their students, but if they're being encouraged and even forced to do this, I've heard of not just younger, but new teachers going through Teachers College now, where they're fully indoctrinated as well in Teachers College for this inclusivity. So I just want to check. Shelley also asked, is this happening in primary schools? Absolutely it is. We've got the documents to show you around that, so we can do that next time because we are running out of time. Can you, Debbie, tell us, it might be a little bit of a strange question and you may not have an answer, but is there anything you would do differently?
Oh, what would I do differently? Hindsight is 2020, and was easy to commiserate and wish I'd never moved to Christchurch. But I think if there was something that I could have done that parents can do, it's monitor your kids' social media, or limit it, or limit how much internet access they have. But at the end of the day, I know that had I laid down the law and told her, what she was and wasn't going to do, as any normal teenager would do, they would just dig their heels in even further. So, but in letting her have that freedom to know that I believe that the way that I've parented her, the bonding that we shared, and I trust that she will, when the time, like when the crux, I mean, I know she's already taken testosterone, but I just have to trust that she will hold on to some reality. And the very fact that I know that I've laid down a boundary and said, no, I'm not going to affirm you. I'm going to be the parent. I'm going to have the courage to be disliked and not be your best friend. and be able to see around corners for you and tell you that it's not right and still love you and, you know, be that anchor. I've been that boundary, and I've copped a lot of flack from it from the rest of the family. But I tell you what, I wouldn't change that for the world.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of other parents who stand with me on that, and I'm proud to stand with them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. We've just got a couple more comments, if you don't mind, a little bit more time here. So Beck has said that, you know, it's not right for the state to intervene, and I completely agree. They need to get their hands off of our children and our grandchildren. So you've got here Mary Baxter, who is helping me with my eye issues. Thanks, Marie. That's not going to look good in the recording, that's for sure. Never mind. Are we approaching all schools in New Zealand over this, and if so, how? So that will come. Now, I'll share with you shortly what we're doing that you can get on board with, and that actually all New Zealanders can get on board with. Was your daughter fully informed? That cross-sex hormones can likely mean that she is unable to have children? Well, you might have covered that, Debbie, but did you?
Yes, I wasn't sure if she had been at the time, but I think she is now. She mentioned something about freezing eggs, but honestly, I mean, she works for KFC. How can she afford such things?
Yeah. Okay. And we've got another one here, Debbie. What did you know about the transgender movement before this happened to you, and what were the steps the school took to encourage her in transitioning?
I knew very little. I knew about transvestitism and autogynephilia, which is sort of similar, but not really. And what did the school do? Sorry, what was that question about the school?
What were the steps the school took to encourage her in transitioning? So you talked early on about not knowing what was happening, but only seeing some signs. Yet she was at school doing this transitioning, right?
Yes, she was. After the fact, I learned about a rainbow club. There's nothing on the school website about a rainbow club. I learned about other girls that were attending the same school with similar broken home backgrounds, attending the Rainbow Club, usually full of angst and ready for social justice and all the rest of it. I did notice that she had a book, I thought it was just an English novel that she had to read or something. And I picked it up one day, and I was surprised that I found it a little bit hard to understand. But I've since found out that it was called IMJ, and I've since found out that is a LGBT book with. I just wonder how many other books that the kids are picking up that are pro transgender, and they're so vulnerable and so impressionable reading books. I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, or probably just a young teenager, reading Anne of Green Gables and thinking that, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to live in the country and, plait my hair, and we're just so vulnerable and impressionable and trusting. It's a part of growing up. So yeah, they've exploited that with the sort of literature that they're putting in schools now too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Deborah has said the majority of schools have no idea of the harm they're causing. You're completely right. The teachers need educating. Well, the sad thing is, Deborah, they're being educated right now around this whole this whole indoctrination. They are actually being indoctrinated just like these students are. We've got here ACC have a program called Mates and Dates who bring facilitators in high school. Yes, we're well aware of that one, and it needs to be stopped as well. A lot of people are thanking you here, Debbie. I don't know what, Charmaine. Sorry, Debbie, you're brave, and it's clear how much you love her. Resist gender. Oh, okay, so this is something I wanted to share towards the end, and we are almost at the end. So we have some resources for people watching. If you are a parent going through anything like this, or even just because you want to make sure that you're doing right by your children before this comes into their world, there is a new website that's been created recently by Kiwis. It's www.resistgendereducation.nz. We'll put a link up to that, but it looks like Beck Resist Gender Education have a support network for parents whose children go through this. Okay, so it looks like Beck's part of that network. So yes, I think that would be really wise to be able to go to. There's also a New Zealand family website called Family First. Now they have produced fantastic resources for parents, but also for schools. I'm not sure how many schools have picked this up or even are aware, but I'd encourage them to go onto Family First and download the document, because it's got there how to help educators. They've even been in touch with a law firm here in Christchurch and had a lot of information from the law around this. As you probably are aware, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits later on, so I'd be very concerned if I was one of those teachers that are pushing this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sad reality is that most of those who are indoctrinated into this ideology actually have no idea of the cool history of transgendering. Yeah. Thank you to everyone who's commented. Thank you for being here. You can continue to ask questions, and Debbie and I will get back to you if you need any support. Just private message me, and I can chat with Debbie. I'm sure she'd like to help where she can as well. So we've given you those resources there. Oh, the last thing, Rebecca, Christy, I think you asked before what we can do. Now I have put up, I don't know if everyone here is aware, but I put a citizens initiated referendum proposal to the government, which has been accepted. That went out in all the mainstream papers last week for submissions. So we will have the Ministry of Education, of course, and a few other groups like Inside Out and Rainbow Community submitting against my question. The question is, we're going to ask New Zealanders if we should remove all gender ideology theory from New Zealand schools. Now, we have 28 days for submissions to come in. Once they're in the question, I'll be travelling the country and getting other people to also travel around and get signatures. So we will need 10% of New Zealand eligible voters to have this go to a referendum to vote to remove gender theory from our schools. So we can do this. This can be done. It's up to you now. I've been working away at this. Our party are working away at this. Debbie and other parents who have been doing this out there, and there's lots of people worldwide, but it's up to you, New Zealanders, to support this so that we can get it to a referendum. So I would just like to say a huge thank you to Debbie for coming on, for sharing her story.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Debbie. And we will do another live around some of the content later. So we are ending the broadcast now. Thank you for all being here participating. Good night.